So tell me the first time you heard the words hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Well, I watch your show all the time, so I knew that was going to be the first question, and I'm trying to remember. But I do recall it wasn't when my mother was diagnosed. I recall I knew about it before, and I think you told me maybe in the years prior, because as you know, your first office was across the street from my mother's home in Hibernia.
Mm-hmm.
And I always saw you kind of like as someone with a butterfly net trying to chase, people who might have it. And you caught my mom in the net and helped her. And for that, our family is very grateful you assisted her get the right care up at Tufts. I do recall hearing it before my mother came home and said, I too have HCM.
So welcome to Tales from the Heart, a podcast from the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. Today I am joined by Kevin O'Connor, and I don't quite know how to start introducing Kevin because our history goes much further back than anyone would possibly even think. And I don't recall not knowing Kevin ever in my life because we grew up in the same town and the same part of town in this tiny little community called Hibernia, New Jersey, which was a mining town from way back when. In the hills behind our house, they mined for iron ore. My uncle died in those mines back in about 1906. And our fathers were in the Hibernia Company 1 Fire Department together. Our mothers were in the Ladies Auxiliary together. We went from the same kindergarten to the same graduation from high school, although we're 2 years apart, year apart.
2
years apart. We've known each other forever. And then, Facebook and friends and community. Kevin's mom gets diagnosed. Kevin is a Hibernia kid who went off to the military, became an attorney, lived happily ever after, has a wonderful family and a lot of siblings. His brother was my electrician. So we go back, and literally outside the first window of the HCMA office, I could see the Chewy's house, the Mason's house, and the O'Connor's house, and the library, which used to be a church. And I was the last child christened in that church.
Wow.
Where Holy Trinity moved up the street. So Hibernia history being made right here. All of the people in all of the world who ends up with a big heart too, Kevin and family. So Kevin, when did I first start harassing you after your mom got diagnosed?
Well, I have to say the HCMA helped our family because we, as you know, my mom went to Tufts and we all went up there with her. And then I have several siblings who were diagnosed, myself. One of my siblings has an extensive history of being treated, and the other has other issues and decided not yet. But I knew I had a heart problem at the age of 19 in the military because I passed out during training a couple times. And I remember the medics were surrounding me and listening, and they said, he's got a murmur and he needs to be checked out. I went into the hospital, and then I recall the testing. I just don't know what the testing was. And they said, it went away. We can't find it. We'd love to throw you out, but we can't, and because, it has to be something they can prove. So they said, listen, you got to come back once a year and be tested. And no one ever followed up. So I sure as heck didn't follow up with them. But I always knew, and it was always when I was prone, like if I was, and I was in a unit that was deployed to Europe, and we did a lot of training with the Army and a lot of, carrying large weapons and things. And when I would be prone and get up quickly, I would pass out. So I'm not that far from that now, where it's, when I do have a syncopal episode, it's typically an abrupt change in position.
So being 19 years old was a couple of years ago. So what happened? So you get a diagnosis of a murmur. They clear you in the military. When's the next time you actually have your heart looked at again?
So my mother went to Tufts, got checked out. I met Dr. Marin up there, and our family was getting tested from that point. And I saw Dr. Wall, as you know, who's now retired, but, and he never, I don't remember him telling me I had HCM, but now that I go back and look at the echoes from then, I had it, and I just didn't hear it, right? Because I was very fit. I was out exercising every day. I would ride my bike 25 miles a day. everywhere.
Wow.
I was fit, and I felt like, this is kind of shameful to say now, because at the time I thought my mom's problems were, oh, well, if she would just, eat better or exercise. My mom ate perfectly fine,
Yeah.
but if she just exercised, right? No, I was just ignorant. Like, I didn't understand that it has nothing. I never did the work to understand that it had nothing to do with those things. So I would go to see Dr. Wall, and then every couple of years. And then in 2021, he said, listen, I'm retiring. You have this HCM. And I'm like, I do? And he said, this is getting bad. You got to go over to see Matt Martinez, Dr. Martinez. He's over at Morristown. He's going to carry you through in the next few years. And I was just like, what is he talking about? But I had noticed that when I would hike with my wife, I would often get very winded. And then I would pretend like I was on my phone. And I would say, oh, hold on, honey, I'm getting a text. I didn't know what was happening. And I thought I was just getting older. And then it really accelerated from that point. So he recommended to me, I did the echo, and then I did the stress in the summer of 22. And I had a gradient of 140. And he said, you got to get this done right away.
So you went a long time without treatment, without follow-up. How many times do you think you passed out between, let's say, getting out of the military and getting diagnosed?
I don't remember ever a full syncopal episode, but I would get close. Like, I would get up out of a chair, and then just, you get the stars in your eyes. And I would have what I now know to be AFib back then, and I just didn't know what it was. I thought it was stress from work, because I'm a trial lawyer, constantly being, challenged in the sense that, whether it be in front of a jury or a judge or in a deposition, people screaming at you or yelling at you, clients being upset or whatever. And I just thought I was just stressed out.
Well, I could understand how one could think that that might be the reason. I do also remember you and I connecting on Facebook a while back. And there was a day, I don't exactly remember when, but you were mowing your lawn and you lay down in a hammock in your backyard, and you took a selfie, and you're like, yeah, I'm getting old. I feel this. And I looked at your color, and I sent you a private message. I'm like, you need to get to a cardiologist, because it wasn't the you that I'm used to seeing. And I'm like, your mother, you've got another sibling that I know there's something going on with. So I'm like, dude, let's go get this checked out. So we get checked out, your gradient's crazy high, and you opt for a myectomy. I had a little bit of a bumpy road with your myectomy. It was not dream team kind of like it's all perfect. So you want to talk a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, I mean, the team, and I did have the choice to go to other centers, and I don't regret my choice at all. I think Morristown was an excellent choice. My wife at the time, her mother was dying of cancer. My wife was running a rehab. She's a therapist, and we just could not afford to have everybody have to go up to Boston or NYU or something, not monetary wise, but just time wise. And, it was weird. I had the myectomy. I did have a lot of AFib after that. And I was feeling so good. If you recall, 2 weeks after the surgery, I went to the masquerade ball, and I was photographed with the surgical team and Matt Martinez, and I felt fantastic. And they were really a class act, and I still feel that way today. But I did start to feel, first of all, I pushed myself too hard. So to those of you who are having it or about to have it, don't lift. I did a deck after that. Like, I did all this stuff. I cracked my sternum lifting up huge, 12 by 12 by 12 boards on my shoulder. I thought, oh, I'm fixed, one and done, but I was developing a series of things that were, I was getting AFib, and then I wasn't able to catch it. So I would go see the team. They'd say, oh, we'll put you on a 7-day monitor. And then I'd come back, they'd say, you had a few NSVT, but nothing really concerning. And I'd be like, come on, So what I did for me, the other thing that happened was I started, when I would exercise, it started to be harder to exercise. My heart rate was constantly in the toilet. I was waking up in the middle of the night with my watch saying, alarm,
Yeah.
heart rate too low. It was literally in the 30s. And I was also getting numb lips, and my face sometimes would go numb. What I did was I got a Cardia, I think.
Cardio mobile monitor. Yeah.
I did
Dave Alpert, did you hear that?
I got the monitor, and I got the plan where you can get, and that honestly was what was able to get me the attention that I needed, because my team wasn't seeing it. I didn't have proof, and the Cardia was the proof. So I then went back to Morristown, and I saw Dr. Katz at the EP, I forget what it's called, but he's an EP. And I showed him, he said, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And I showed him these Cardia strips, and he said, "Oh boy." And what I was getting was some sort of intermittent heart block. And
I can relate. Maybe it's a hibernia thing.
yeah. And then that's where I really, learned a lot about this disease. I learned how to advocate for myself. Somebody recently told me, I think it was last October, I ran into Bill Rossi and Jan Berger, and they convinced me that it's not, I was in the military. You didn't go outside your chain of command. So for me to go and get advice from another physician, and I felt it was a little dishonest or disloyal. It's not at all. And I now know that. So, I went to Dr. Katz, and he was fantastic. He advocated for an ICD. Thank goodness, because I was shocked 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks ago, excuse me, February.
A month ago.
I know, a month ago. And what I started to develop was this thing in my heart where it would flood if I got my heart rate over a certain point, 110 or so. All of a sudden, the heart would just flood, and it felt out of whack, even with pacing, right? So they put in a pacemaker, they put in an ICD, but I'm still getting this thing. And then so I decided to get an opinion from Dr. Marin, and I went up to Leahy last year, and he said, you've got dysynchrony. Your ventricles are literally bumped. He said you can literally see it without even needing a machine to tell you that they're out of whack. That's where we're at now, where they tried to come in, and Lisa, I have to say, this better than anybody, because at every step of the way, Lisa would say, "Oh well, that's not going to fix it. Probably not going to fix it, and they may have problems getting in there." I'm like, what? So my wife and I went for the surgery, and the surgeon comes in and he says, "So I'm going to try to go in through your blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Wait, try?" He goes, yeah. He goes, "There's a chance it's not going to work." So sure enough, get in there, CRT upgrade, right? So you're taking a third lead, you're adding another lead around the back of your ventricle, your left ventricle. So I already have 2 leads on the right side.
So it encompasses both sides, so you're getting synchrony. So instead of you're just pacing from here, you get a pace beat from the outside that is synchronizing the contraction to give you a little oomph in your ejection fraction, because your EF is now blunting around that 50, high 40s, 50 mark. So yeah, how to change.
I guess I should say that, when you look at my ejection fraction pre-myectomy, I was 70.
Yeah.
Right. Now at the time, Dr. Martinez was like, "Don't pat yourself on the back. That's not a good thing."
Right.
Hypercontractility, whatever.
Yeah.
Now I've slowly come down, and now I'm in the 45 range. Right. So that's a huge delta, right?
Yeah.
So did you want to maybe say something about that? CRT is just not commonly used.
So CRT devices, so we are in arrhythmia management March, which is kind of why I asked Kevin to join us to tell his story, because it's very arrhythmia based. Yes, he's got a family history. Yes, the murmur was detected young. Yes, we probably should have gotten in there with management earlier in Kevin's life. But here we are today with this gradient that was high. Something had to be done about it. He opted for surgery. We have some AFib after surgery, but it's continued beyond the post-surgical time. which tells us that the left atria is really having a hard time complying with what we need it to do. Now we have the ejection fraction dropping out a little bit, and we need to get synchrony back. So there's this chain that happens, and about 5 to 8% of those with HCM will drop their ejection fraction and go into this space where CRT might be an option to give a little boost, but the data hasn't been really robust that it's a destination. It's not like, oh, we'll put the CRT in and you'll all be better. It gives you about 10% increase in your ejection fraction, and it can help that synchrony, which can make you feel better. And it's just not a common option. I would say I was offered a CRT device before my transplant, and I declined it because my access was so poor. It wasn't like, for me, it wasn't worth even trying. I was so far at the end. But for those who are not quite at the end of the heart yet and might want a little bit more time, CRT is an option, and it can improve quality of life, but it's not destination. So there's my what happened to Kevin in 2-minute version. Was that about accurate?
Yeah, no, that's great. And, for me, I still have obstruction. I am not eligible for CMI, a cardiac myosin inhibitor, because of my ejection fraction being below 50. So the only thing really is an ablation for AFib. I will say the shock appears to, I've never seen the strip, so I can't say for sure, but from what I'm told, it originated with AFib that then deteriorates into rapid ventricular response. So that deteriorated into, that was around 200, I clocked in at 250 beats per minute in my ventricles, which it tried to pace me out of it, but it wouldn't work. So the nurse called me the next morning and said, "You were very, very fortunate, man."
Yeah, I got a text message from Kevin in code letting me know that his device went off, and February 3rd could have had a very different meaning to your family. And these are the moments where, especially when everything seems a little bit chaotic in the world and things seem like they're not going right, I'm going to take a few minutes and unpack some rights because I need to be the optimist somewhere. There was a guy named Michelle Moraski, and he has an amazing story. Ross typically drops links here, but Ross had to run off to another meeting. So I will try to drop it post-production. But Michelle Moraski was an amazing man. He escaped from Poland, has this amazing pathway to come to the United States. It took him many, many years. But one of his mentors, while trying to become a doctor, while growing up and leaving his home at age like 15 or something, and on this mission to become a doctor, and he's Jewish, and it's World War II, and he's leaving Poland. So it's got so much drama, and his story is just absolutely inspiring. So his mentor died of a cardiac arrest. And he knew that if he could have gotten an electric impulse to his mentor, he might have been able to restart his heart, which at that point sounded like nothing but Frankenstein. It sounded crazy. And nobody would listen to Dr. Moraski. They just would not listen to him. Years go on, and he finally gets approval for this defibrillator thing to be used. And they're like, okay, if people have already survived this cardiac arrest thing more than once, then you can experiment on them. So the bar was pretty high, and it's a pretty rare subset to find. So he finds 4 people, and in the original paper on ICDs, when you look at the examples of the 4 patients that got the 4 original ICDs, it definitely appears that 3 of them had HCM. One of them did not. So we were the original people the devices were used on, but we didn't get the first utilization. It went to people with different types of heart disease, more coronary artery disease and low EF and that kind of a patient. But Dr. Marin did work with Dr. Moraski way back in the day and really understood the value of ICDs and HCM and really became the one to push the concept forward. And if not for individuals having a little bit of chutzpah, saying, I got an idea. It sounds a little crazy, but I want to purposely electrocute people when their heart's going to a bad rhythm, and I can save their lives. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved from this technology. So this technology only exists because we did clinical trials to see how they work and to evaluate risk and benefit and whether they were cost effective or not. And we did all of that work through really great science, through the National Institute of Health, through the FDA, through other regulatory bodies, and got this device into the hands not only of millions and millions of Americans, but then worldwide. So how did Kevin's device go off on February 3rd and save his life so he could be here to talk to me today on March 14th? Because of a very, very detailed process to ensure that that device was safe and appropriate and could be here to extend his life. So there's your civics lessons for the day.
Yeah, and I want to just talk a little bit about how you helped out with that and how you helped me help myself out with that, because I think it's important for people that are here. And I see a lot on the discussion board about this, right? So I was in the hospital in February of last year getting Ticastin, right? I was, whatever the terminology is to be.
An antiarrhythmic, you were being loaded on Ticastin.
Loaded, that's the word, yeah. They were loading me, and I was there for 3 days so they could watch. And because they want to watch the QRS, or what is it called? The QRS?
The interval, yeah.
The interval. And so I was there for 3 days, and my wife and I were like, well, why aren't you installing, because you're going to install the pacemaker, why don't you install a defibrillator? And there was some debate among the team, right, about whether to do that. And Dr. Katz felt strongly it was beneficial, but Dr. Martinez wasn't yet on board, so they had to talk about it. So you were up on the 4th floor. I was on the 3rd floor with the whole monitor on me. So I broke out and went up the stairs, and the alarms are going off. And I got you in the room, and we're talking, and you helped me. And you're like, this is what you need to, you showed me how to calculate your sudden cardiac arrest score. And you knew a little bit about my family. I won't go into the details of that, but there had been a history in my family of an appropriate shock that I didn't know gives you a bit more of a boost on the score. And I didn't know.
A family history of sudden death or appropriate ICD shock. So people forget that second part.
And that's where, like, I learned, wow, when you do your intake with your team, you really got to be very clear with them about your family history, about other people being shocked, about other people with this disease. And so once that was cleared up, and then what I knew in my heart for real, I knew this was getting worse, like, for me. So I advocated for myself, and it obviously has paid off, in the sense that I was protected. And I would just encourage anyone out there, if you're feeling like you're not being heard, these people care for us. They're very busy. And you look at the rate of reimbursement sometimes, and you're like, wow, for what they do and how much the insurance company pays them, like how hard it must be for them to just stay engaged, but they do. But they can't know everything about you,
It is very much a conversation. And we have to make sure that we as patients are doing our part to communicate the best we can. Maybe a family member doesn't want to share information with you and you don't know. You can't really do much about it. You can just say, here's my sibling's situation. I think his doctor's up here. I don't know what's going on. That's all I know. And sometimes that's enough to say, oh, if they're with that guy, that's a good guy. That's a person I do know, I don't know. It gives them some kind of a litmus test to know whether that's a well-managed person or not, or whatever. And then it gives us an opportunity to think ourselves about, what is our family history? What did happen? Or what are my symptoms? Am I expressing them well? Because we all got a problem. It's an entire HCM spectrum disorder problem. We want to be fine. We want to be okay. So when somebody asks us, how you doing? The default answer is fine. And we don't go into well, I almost passed out 3 times last week while I was moving, from this point to this point. And I felt my heart racing for about 4 hours over the past 2 days. And I, I can't really eat like I used to because I get nauseous when I eat. And I I get a little swelling, but it's in my belly. It's not in my legs. So when you start going down there's a little of this and a little of that, those little things matter. And we need to communicate. Even though we feel like we're complaining, we're not. We're reporting. So if we can report these things, I still see clinic records that say patient complained of. And if I see the word complained, I'm like, we need to talk to that doctor. It's not a complaint, it's a report. How many times have you been asked if you're fine and you said, or how you feel and you just said fine?
Oh, I'm guilty of that. There's no doubt.
Because we all want to be fine.
When I was a kid, my mom, she would say, because she had 7 children, and you didn't complain, and that it's a balancing act that we have to do as patients.
Okay, you just made me go flashback. All right, so it's the 70s. Bum, bum, bum. Before your house burned down. Ooh, that's a timeline item, isn't it? I can remember that, but I don't remember what year it was. So my cousins used to live basically across the street from you. Jill and Tom Flanagan lived in the Mason's house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my Uncle Tom lived there. So actually, you had 2 people with HCM living a couple of feet from each other that weren't related. Because my Uncle Tom passed away in 1990, and he was diagnosed with IHSS in the 60s, and his 2 kids were there. So I would go to my cousin Jill's and hang out with Jill, because then I could go to the field and play on the big slide when the big kids would let me. Mostly they made me go on the little slide, but that's an entirely different drama and PTSD moment for another day. But we used to play in that area, and your mom was not one to be messed with.
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Connor, you respected her. She told you to do something. You did not mess around, because that woman did not have time to mess around because she had too many kids to run after. Your mom was a little scary. Just a little.
She would, if you came in and said you had a tummy ache or something, she would say, "Oh, that's quite dramatic," and so, you grew up that way, and then you're in the military where you don't really complain. And so, I'm definitely guilty, with my physicians of downplaying what was going on. And so, but, the other thing is, I have to say how shocked I am how many physicians that I meet who don't know anything about this disease. And I'm not talking about COEs. I'm not talking about that. But if you go to an urgent care, one time I went there, I had such bad AFib, I thought I was dying. And I went to the ER, the emergent care in Mountain Lakes. Very nice people. But they put me in a bus. I was in a bus, and there were two ambulances. And it was like, no, guys, I'm okay. I just need that. That was when I learned that people with HCM, and the other thing is how many times I hear, sometimes even cardiologists that are not experts in this area, that you tell them I can't eat, I feel like I'm going to throw up. They're like, well, that has nothing to do with this. It's like, and now I've learned that of course it does, right?
Of course it does. And it's not something that happens to somebody with what I would call stable HCM and nothing really going on other than the walls are a little thick and they're mildly symptomatic. You're not going to see that kind of a symptom in that person. But as the ejection fraction drops and the heart is struggling and the fluid volume is struggling to be maintained, and we might be looking at, diuretics being brought on board to help fluid maintenance so we don't go into congestive heart failure. So it happens then. And it is an incredibly common thing to see among those who are heading to transplant. So I know there's the T word I just dropped. It doesn't mean that Kevin's going there anytime soon, but you keep all options on the table when your heart is not functioning right. And you talk to all the people and you build your team and you get in front of things. You don't want to be surprised by anything in your heart. You want it planned. You want to really think about, okay, if I'm going to go left or right, I don't really have a choice. I got to go one way or the other. How do I want to play this? And I'll jump into a conversation I had with Marty Marin in the summer of 2011, I think it was. My EF was 45 for the first time. And we were like, uh-oh, that's not good. And I knew the data. And I said, do not say the word. I am not ready. I am feeling fine. I can do this. Do not say that word. And he's like, but I'm like, shh, no T word. Stop. And I don't know why I acted so silly about it. I did not want to say the word. I did not want to deal with it. It was too big for me at the time. And I said, I'll know when. And that was the stupidest thing I ever did. Stupidest thing I ever did. I should have gotten the testing done earlier to know what my numbers were. I should have had more data to know when things were going to start to move into a different direction. And I didn't do that. So I'm very clear to tell everybody else, okay, don't wait until the last second. I almost didn't get there in time. So you meet the people early. I think this is happening. Let them optimize your medical management. Let them optimize your devices, your procedures. Let's get that heart working the best it can for as long as it can. And then if we need to trade it out for a new one, we open that door. So you're in the middle of a process here, and it's a lot to take. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, I have, one thing that you didn't mention that I'll mention is, I'm a 58-year-old man that is pretty proud and doesn't need any help from the outside. But this is the first time that I've actually gone to see a therapist because I wanted to work through those issues. I was sitting in Hamilton. The play. And I don't want to ruin the play for those who don't see it, but there's the main character, his wife says to him, you seem like you feel like you're running out of time. She said that a couple of times. And I was sitting there and it hit me and I'm like, wow, that's how I feel. And then I went down to the restroom because I use the restroom like every 10 seconds now. Unfortunately, that's another thing. And I couldn't, walking back up the 3 flights of stairs was very difficult. So I was like, ugh. So I sit in my chair and there's a scene where someone gets shot. And there's a heartbeat, this huge heart. Did you see the show?
I've not, no.
So there's this heartbeat is reverberating through the theater and the person, it stops. And I lost it. I was like, oh my God, that's going to happen to me. It's kind of silly. Of course, it's going to happen to every single person watching this, right? But when you're faced with this, right, and the prospect down the road of making a decision, am I going to go in this direction or am I going to go in the direction of just letting it ride out, right? There are people that and I know that have done that.
Yeah. Right? You do get to make some decisions because it's your one wild and precious life, and you can opt to go down one path or another. I know people who have been in this situation and are like, I'm just going to see what I got left and I'm going to go out with what I came in with. Okay. A dear friend of mine who did not have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, he had a single ventricle, single left ventricle at birth. She was a dear friend. She was my assistant in my human resource life. And she told me, I never want a transplant. No, I never want it. Actually visited with her a couple weeks before I got listed, thinking I was going to try to convince her to get listed. So I got listed a month after that conversation. 6 months after that, she needed to do a revision of her surgery and it did not go well. And I'm like, honey, I wish you would have gone to transplant. No, I have time. And at the very, very end, she's like, okay, now I want a transplant. And her liver was gone. The heart was beyond repair. Her system had completely broken down and she didn't qualify to be listed.
Wow.
So you never want to be in a situation where you don't have an option. And she changed her mind. We're all allowed to change our mind, but you got to do it when it's viable. And yesterday, I was in New York City and I checked on Brandy and I got home last night and it did something I never did before in my entire life. I read my echocardiogram out loud to my husband in bed. And it was a dramatic reading. It was like ejection fraction, 65%, normal LV function. Like,
Wow.
I never thought I'd see that on my own echo report. My wall measurements, my septum is 0.9, my free wall is 0.9,
9.
0.9, and my valves work normally. Okay, so I have a little intermittent heart block and I got a leadless pacemaker in my right ventricle, but that's okay. That's okay. She's working. So you can get through it. And you have your checkup and they're like, how you doing? I'm like, without lying, I'm good. I got a couple little things I got to work on, and you never get out completely unscathed from such a thing. But the heart is fabulous.
That's
Who would
great.
have thought? Who would have thought? So, a couple other rabbit hole issues. When you were a kid, you ever go up to the cemetery at the top of the hill?
I was up there all the time. And you saw the empty graves and you wondered what the heck happened there.
So one of those empty graves, well, in 1995, they tried to dig up my grandparents. They went for the wrong grave because they didn't have any money. They weren't buried with anything. So we refilled that in. That's a whole story for another podcast. That'll be in the book. It's going to be fun. It's a cemetery story. But when you come in to St. Patrick's from like where the entrance is supposed to be, directly over to your left, there's a tall monument and it's to Timothy Hart, Hart. That's my great uncle on top of the mountain. And he was lost in the mines.
Wow.
So HCM is literally in the fabric of Hibernia through your family and through mine. And it's just crazy that, so when Kevin comes in and we say, okay, like here we are, like you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm like, you need to think about board service because you get it. There's nobody closer to my origin story on the board than you are, even from my husband's on the board, but he comes from a different perspective. You knew those old players, like they were the cast of characters in the background of your childhood, and your family was there as mine. And here we are tied by a disease that's supposed to be so rare. Let's do the numbers. How many people live in Hibernia at that time? Like 300 max? That's statistically improbable. Couple of shout outs to Dr. Wall, Bob Wall. Good man. I don't know if you're ever going to hear this or not. I wouldn't let him be my cardiologist because I needed to be able to fight with my cardiologist for my dad. And I kept the line. So he was my dad's cardiologist and he was my sister's cardiologist. And he did retire, but there are people in my story that play a really big part, even though they don't necessarily think that they do. He was the person who declared my sister dead. And he did so by kissing her forehead. He didn't sign a piece of paper and walk out of a room. He held her hand, he kissed her forehead, and he said some very kind words. And then he did what he needed to do legally. He had compassion and empathy, and for that I will always be grateful to him.
Yeah.
And then there's another early day note that I want to bring up, and I'm going to sideline here for a second. The universe does strange things. Listen to the universe. If somebody shows up in your life, just pay attention because there's reasons. So because I did not use Dr. Wall, I needed to find another local cardiologist at the time. And I came to know a man by the name of Arthur Fish. Dr. Arthur Fish practiced in Morristown, and he was my treating cardiologist for a great number of years before I kind of went more towards heart failure. And then I went to a heart failure program as my local cardiologist, and then I have my HCM team. So Art Fish was a great guy, very kind, very nice, took good care of me. After my transplant, I walked into his office, knocked on the door one day. I'm like, I need to see him. They thought I was a pharma rep. I'm not a pharma rep. I'm an old patient. They're like, how can you be an old patient? I'm like, because I had a heart transplant. And then I got to talk to him. So I talked to Art for a few minutes, thanked him. We had a hug. We had some chit chat, and off I went. Fast forward to Cytokinetics Lobby, December 2024, HCMA meet and greet mini meeting. I get a message on LinkedIn from a gentleman saying, I work in a company that might be doing some business with you. We're a database company. I'm going to attend your event today. And oh, by the way, my dad used to be a cardiologist in Morristown, New Jersey. I grew up going to the Rockaway Mall on the weekends. I'm like, yeah, we probably hung out. So I said, okay. And then I looked at his name and it was David Fish. And I
Wow.
said, "Is your dad Art?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Your dad was my cardiologist." And I looked up and he was in the front corner of the room and I went over to speak to him and I'm like, wow, small world. So that was the beginning of December. During the Christmas break, I sent his father a video message because his father was aging, had dementia, and was not doing well.
Hmm.
So I sent him a note and he sent me a video back remembering me and basically proud of the work that we've been doing all these years, and was a very kind message. And I just found out 2 weeks ago he passed away.
Oh, so sorry.
So a little piece of my history was lost there. And another piece of the story, which will be its own podcast for another day. And maybe Kevin will join me on these too. I've got a new idea on how I'm going to finally get my book written. But there was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Samnick. Stephen Samnick, much like Kevin, was an attorney. He came into my life in 1995 when my sister passed away, and there was custody issues and estate issues, and it was just a hot freaking mess, people. I was filing a lawsuit against the National Institute of Health, and I'm going to post a blog post on that later. As somebody who has sued the National Institute of Health for fraud and misrepresentation in 1996, I 150% support the NIH today and the employees there. So good institutions can have bad players infiltrate them. Don't blame the institution. Get rid of the bad guys. And we did. And the system worked. So that being said, Stephen Samnick helped us in court on a number of different issues, including making case law at the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey with relationship to my sister's estate and protecting children from fund being taken by the new spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some laws that were being tested, and we brought it to the Supreme Court, and Stephen Samnick, my friend and attorney, won that case.
Wow.
And Kevin, you know, not many people get to argue at the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey.
No.
And he did it for us, and he did it for my sister's children. Steve passed away earlier this month. And he had to be 90 something. He was a fierce advocate for the underdog. And I will forever be in his debt. And there are few people on the planet who would have done the things that he did with the just purity of heart to do the right thing for kids who lost their mom. I love Steve Samnick. My condolences to all who grieve him.
Yeah.
The world will not be the same without him. So I lost 2 parts of my history in the past month, and they're older gentlemen. That's going to happen. But I think it's important to acknowledge those people who made really impactful moments in our life happen. So
Thank you.
thank you. So sorry to hijack the last few minutes of your podcast with that, but I think it's important. Kevin, you are a patient, you are a warrior, you are on a battle. What else do you want to share with the listeners? I'm sure we'll have you back again to talk more, but any final thoughts?
Be nice to a lawyer. We have big hearts. Lawyers are going to save. Lawyers are out there fighting every day for you. It's so funny when people get in trouble. It's the first one they call. Regardless of where your politics are today, people are calling on lawyers and judges to make sure the laws are followed. And I'm really grateful for being here. I just want to share one last story. It's kind of funny. I had to go yesterday to see a new cardiologist because Dr. Wall retired, and I went to see someone that he's great, very nice guy, but he's my son's age, you know. It's like, but he said, "Wow, you went to see Dr. Marin." He's like, "He's a legend. He taught me how to read an EKG," you know. And he goes, "If he says you need the CRT, you need the CRT." So I've made arrangements for that, and I'm also seeing the team over there to talk about the planning that you described. And let's hope I never need it, you know. We'll see.
That is the hope. There are some new medications coming and new therapies that might be able to change trajectory, but we keep everything out on the table and we play the cards as we need to. And we keep a decent attitude about it.
Yes.
We definitely do. It's not always easy living life, period. Life in 2025, it's unique stressors, right? I think we all need to have calm heads no matter the situation, whether we're talking about our health or our politics.
Yeah.
How do we get through the moment and make the next day better? And the answers aren't always easy. Sometimes they're really, really complicated and there's no guarantee of outcomes. But we do our very best with as much information as we can muster. And I hope we all remember to not only take care of ourselves, but to take care of those around us. It's crazy out there right now. And we need to make sure that all of this technology and all of this knowledge that we have amassed is used for the greater good and to protect the most. So if you've not signed up for our Hill Day, you really have until the end of today to do so. You must have your intake and navigation call done before the Hill Day event itself, just so we understand how everybody can share their story most effectively. We aren't there to push a political agenda. We will be talking about the generic drug quality problem. This is bipartisan.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
I did go last year. I don't know that I'll be able to go this year just because of all this stuff going on. But it is, if for those of you who are on the fence, it is such a good time, and we had so much fun. And it's like you just said, Lisa. It's not about D's or R's or anything like that. You go and you literally walk into the offices, if you will, of senators and congressmen who invite you in and sit and talk to them about this disease. It's amazing. Like, what country is there where you can just walk around in a building and just walk right into their office without an appointment? It was amazing. And so if you're on the fence about it, please try to go.
Try to join us if you live in the DC area and you just want to pop in for the actual briefing itself. You don't want to walk the hill, you're welcome to do that too. Get the information on the website. Unfortunately, I don't have the link right here right now, but just go to 4hcm.org, look at the events calendar. We will be there April 9th. If there's not a shutdown. If there's a shutdown, we're going to have to reschedule. But it is really important that our voices are heard and that they're calm and that they're clear and that they are focused on actionable items. The generic drug quality issue it's a problem that has a solution. Let's enact the solution. Step therapy and pre-authorizations, they are wasteful and inefficient. Let's figure out a better way that we can get insurance companies and doctors to agree to let doctors be doctors and provide the care that they need to provide for us. Have a nice day. Let's get some money appropriated to the Hearts Act so that we can do cardiomyopathy education in high schools. These are the types of things that will make a difference. And big shout out, it should be done at the latest Tuesday, State of Virginia, the law, including the questions on the well-child examination for family heart health history. We have passed that law. We have approximately 2 days left. It went to the governor last Friday. He has 7 days to sign it. We weren't sure if those were calendar days or not. So by Tuesday, if he doesn't sign it, it automatically becomes law. So yay, Virginia. Thank you to all those in Virginia who reached out, participated in our briefing. We got that law passed almost as quickly as we got the one in the state of New Jersey. So yes, I have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Can you fast? Thank you. Volkan, interesting name. Intermittent fasting could potentially be done safely, but hydration is critical. So you do not want to ever limit your water, and you want to work with your healthcare provider to determine what method of dieting or fasting is appropriate for you and your heart. Hydration levels can impact obstruction quite severely. So you never want to find yourself dehydrated. So please make sure that you're staying hydrated and talk to your doctor about the best diet options for you. Oh, and Elon made a comment earlier on about when you said following the chain of commands. Doctors often get upset when you don't follow this chain of command. I think insecure doctors worry about second opinions. I think anybody who's secure knows enough to know that they don't know everything and that somebody else's point of view could prove helpful in a situation. So don't be scared about going to get a second opinion. I have people who've gone to 2 different centers of excellence for opinions. I think 2 is enough. I've had people who go to 3 and 4, and then you're doctor shopping, and just think about what you're doing, getting one idea, getting another idea, coming to a discussion group, talking to your peers, talking it out with your family, and then going back with follow-up questions works really well. We can help prepare you for those questions during intake and navigation calls. Kevin, thank you so much. And thank you to all the sponsors of HCMA and Tales from the Heart. Shouts out to Carl the dog. If you follow, you know. So thanks, Joey, for your editing prowess, and much love to Carl. Kevin, final words?
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Board.
Off to Sweden for me. Yeah, I get to fly out at 9 o'clock tonight. Joy.
The Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association would like to thank our sponsors, Cytokinetics, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Edgewise Therapeutics.